I'm the author of Advancements of Science and Technology for UPSC Civil Services Examination. And before we get into the contents of this book, let me first discuss in depth about me. I'm an assistant professor at International Institute of Business Studies, and I'm also an author, so as I have already told you. But this is not the only book which I have authored. I have authored Science and Technology as well as Environment and Ecology books, and recently I'm writing an internal security book for GKP Publishers. I'm a psychologist and mental health counselor. I'm an innovation ambassador certified by the Government of India. I'm a design thinking and innovation consultant as well as certified Kaizen professional. So along with these, I have 6 other different certifications in my hand. Let us first understand what UPSC is demanding in science and technology. So let us go through the syllabus. So when it comes to the UPSC syllabus, prelim syllabus is not clearly defined, right? So it gives certain 5-6 points, which is not at all clearly defined, even for the science and technology part. So this is the point. General issues on environmental ecology, biodiversity and climate change that do not require subject specializing in general science. So that is a very crude way of giving the syllabus. So if you're looking at the prelim syllabus and if you're studying science and technology, that is endless. You cannot clearly understand what to study and what not to study, because science is extremely vast and you will not be able to memorize everything. You will not be able to by heart anything. You will not be able to really understand anything. So that's why you have to go through the main syllabus. So in the mains, in the GS paper 3, we have this science and technology syllabus. So clearly define what all areas you will have to focus upon. Science and technology developments and their applications and their effect in the day-to-day life. So any kind of science and technology that has day-to-day application, that is extremely important for UPSC examination. So both for the prelims as well as the mains, they will ask the areas where it has the human application, right? So the science and technology developments and their applications and effects into the day-to-day life, that is extremely important for both prelims and mains. And achievements of Indians in science and technology, right? In our book, I have given a specific area where it focuses on the achievements of Indians in science and technology, both ancient, medieval and modern, right? And indigenization of technology and developing new technologies, right? So what kind of technology we have indigenized and made our own? Because when you're talking about supercomputer technology, that was denied to India because India has gone for the nuclear test. We have developed our own supercomputer technology, right? That is indigenization of technology and developing new technology. And awareness in the fields of IT, space, computers, robotics, nanotechnology, biotechnology, and issues related to intellectual property rights. So these are all the areas that we have to cover in UPSC science and technology preparation for both prelims as well as mains. Okay, now let us understand the contents of my book, Advancements of Science and Technology. Let me now discuss about the contents of this book. So the very first thing, when you're talking about science and technology, first we have to understand the essence of science and technology. That means why the science and technology is extremely crucial, why it is necessary to study for UPSC Civil Services examination. And other than UPSC Civil Services examination, if you see any of the government examinations, science and technology has become the integral part of examinations. Why? The reason why science and technology has become integral in every examination is because we are able to solve the people's problems using science and technology. So that is what I discuss in understanding the essence of science and technology. Why do we really have to work on science and technology? So that is the first thing. And as a part 1, I started discussing about biology and biotechnology. The reason why I started discuss about biology and biotechnology is because until or unless the life has started on the earth, there is no science and technology. There is no study of science and technology. The science and technology present in the universe, the science is present in the universe, but where were the humans to study that, right? So the very first understanding about the science comes from the existence of the humankind. So that's why the very first part is biology and biotechnology. In this biology and biotechnology, so the very first one is evolution of life on our special planet Earth, right? The Earth has been extremely special planet. So we have about 8 planets and 1 dwarf planet, and we have different asteroids, we have comets, we have the entire systems, the galactic systems within our solar system. But the Earth is extremely special because the life exists only on the Earth. The known life exists only on the Earth. So that's why the Earth is very special. So what actually made the evolution of life on the Earth? That is the first understanding in the chapter 1. In this I have discussed how the universe has actually formed, how the solar system has actually formed, and what made Earth so special, and what is life, and what is the driving force of evolution. These are the concepts I have discussed in the chapter 1. So what is the driving force for life to evolve? Mutations, random mutations, and then the survival of the fittest. Right? So these are the core fundamental forces that led to the existence of life. Okay? And in the chapter 2, I discussed about biomolecules. Right? So when you're talking about life, life existed because of the biomolecules. There are 4 different types of biomolecules. Right? So carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and as well as proteins. So these are the 4 biomolecules that actually came together for the existence of life. So I started discussing about the biomolecules, and then I went to the central dogma of molecular biology. So what is this central dogma of molecular biology? So from the science part, we are shifting into the technology part. So we have understood about the life, right? What actually constitutes the life? What are the ingredients that are present within the life systems? And then what is the central dogma of molecular biology? That means what actually makes our life. So we have the DNA. From the DNA comes the protein. So that is the central dogma of molecular biology with an intermediate molecule called RNA. Right? From the DNA comes the RNA. From RNA comes the protein. So that is the central dogma of molecular biology. And chapter 3 is talking about cells and its organelles. So the basics of life. So when you're talking about basics of life, so what is a cell? Right? So every organism is made up of a cell. Cell is the structural and functional component of an organism. So what is a cell? What different ingredients are there within the cell? Right? So we have the prokaryotes, we have the eukaryotes. Within the prokaryotes, all the bacteria comes. Within the eukaryotes, all the plant and animal cells comes. Right? So what is actually present within the cell? So all this is discussed in the chapter 3. Right? Introduction, cell, how many types of cells exist, and technology associated with the science. Right? This is what we have discussed in the cells and its organelles. And in the chapter 4, the most important chapter with respect to the UPSC Civil Services examination is biotechnology. So why biotechnology? Because here UPSC is not precisely focusing on the core sciences. It is not about the core science, right? So it is about the application of the core science in the technology to solve the problems. So biotechnology is that domain that actually solves the people's problems, right? So that's why biotechnology is extremely crucial. So the very first thing I'm covering is the role of biotechnology in our lives. Why? The role of biotechnology in our lives. Before you get into studying biotechnology, let us understand the importance of biotechnology in our life so our preparation will become easier. And then biotechnology in India. So what all we have done for the development of biotechnology in India? What are the government initiatives for the development of biotechnology in India? What organizations do we have that works in the development of biological sciences and biotechnology in India? And Department of Biotechnology initiatives and biotechnology budget. How much amount of money is being spent for the development of sciences, right? You might have seen the vaccine war movie, right? So the India has become the largest supplier of the COVID vaccine during the time of crisis. So how it has become a magnificent country which actually supplies the vaccines to the rest of the world. We are supplying about 1/3 of the vaccines to the world, right? So that is the development of biotechnology. And the chapter 5, we are talking about genetic engineering. So what do you mean by engineering, right? So when you're talking about engineering, everybody thinks about BE or BTech, right? So that is what engineering is, or MTech or ME. So engineering is nothing but take the raw material and constitute together and build something innovative. So that is what engineer, to construct, to manufacture something new. So here what we are doing in genetic engineering, right? So we are taking the genetic material, DNA, and we are engineering it, we are modifying it, we are constructing a new DNA in the way we want. So that is genetic engineering, right? Here we have understanding the DNA. So without understanding the DNA, you cannot modify the DNA. So let us first understand the DNA, and then polymerase chain reaction, that is a basic science, how the DNA functions, how the DNA replicates, right? And then how you are replicating that process in the laboratory, that is polymerase chain reaction. Okay, and central dogma of molecular biology we have already discussed. So this is more important in genetic engineering because ultimately we have to isolate the protein from the DNA. So DNA itself is nothing but a code which actually synthesizes a protein. So ultimately we need a protein to make any kind of physiological changes in the body. So that's why we have the central dogma of molecular biology, and then the gene cloning or molecular cloning or DNA cloning. So with the DNA, we are trying to clone the DNA. We are trying to create the exact replica of the DNA and use the DNA to synthesize the protein which we want. So that is gene cloning. And for gene cloning, for the gene to be expressed, you have to put it into the other cell. So that is gene transfer methods. We have to transfer the gene into one of the cell. So mostly we use the bacteria to synthesize the protein. So to transfer the DNA, what are the methods that we have? And genomic libraries. So when you're talking about a library is nothing but an assimilation of books, right? So whatever the book we want, we can go to the library, get the book. The same way, so the genes once isolated and sequenced, so we have to put those sequences in the genetic libraries where whenever we want that particular gene, we can go and get the gene back. We do not have to go through the entire process again, right? So that is genomic libraries, and then the organism cloning. So we discussed about the gene cloning. So creating an exact replica of a gene, but at the same time, we have to create the exact replica of an organism as well. That is organism cloning. So even though there are many ethical implications that are associated with the organism cloning, so we have varied applications of organism cloning, like creating the high yield varieties in the animals, right? So bringing back the extinct species, or increasing the population of the endangered species, and isolating the biological components from the cloned animals. So all these are the applications of the organism cloning. So the technology which we use for organism cloning is somatic cell nuclear transfer technique. Somatic cell nuclear transfer technique. And human cloning, what is the ethical dilemma? Because how can you create the clones? So when you're talking about human cloning, so if you're cloning me, multiple copies, so there can be a complete bias on the cloned organisms, cloned humans, saying that they are inferior and the naturally born are superior, and there is a chance of organ harvesting as well. So there are many ethical dilemma associated with the human cloning. And assisted reproductive technologies. So when you're talking about assisted reproductive technologies, so with the dietary conditions, there is a greater effect on the fertility of the individuals, right? So in India and the world. So because of which most of the people are not able to deliver the baby. So that problem can be solved using the assisted reproductive technologies, right? Intrauterine insemination. So we have intrafallopian insemination. We have surrogacy. So all these are associated with the assisted reproductive technologies. So because the people do not have the knowledge of assisted reproductive technologies, they're going for unhygienic practices to deliver the child, so which is problematic. So to address that, we have brought this assisted reproductive technology into the market to create the awareness. And next one, medical termination of pregnancy bill of 2020, because so women rights are in the upsurge. So the previously the women do not have the take on the delivery or the abortion of the baby. So medical termination has become like a joke because the women were not taken their opinion. So that's why we have the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Amendment Bill of 2020 and the Surrogacy Bill of 2020. So to contain the commercial surrogacy, to encourage the altruistic surrogacy, we have brought the Surrogacy Bill of 2020, which is actually repealed. It is not functional. And the Drugs and Clinical Trials Rules of 2019. So how to perform the clinical trials. These are all included in the chapter. And in the chapter 6, regenerative medicine. So what do you mean by regenerate? So whenever you have an injury in your body, so the cells regenerate to form the tissue, right? Even though human cells are not totipotent, they are multipotent. That means they can multiply into some different cells. That's all. You can say bone marrow is pluripotent, where it can divide into any type of blood cell. So the same way we have regenerative medicine. How do you regenerate the organs? How do you regenerate the tissues in your body? So here, introduction of the regenerative medicine. With the regenerative medicine, we can do wonders. We can really do wonders with the regenerative medicine. So one of the problem with the organ transplantation is the graft rejection, right? If you're transplanting my part to your body part, right? So your body will be seeing my body part as an alien part, and it will attack the organ. So which is very problematic when it comes to the organ transplantation. So with the regenerative medicine, we can actually grow your own organs in the laboratory, and we can implant into your own body whenever there is malfunction. So that is the importance of regenerative medicine. So introduction to the regenerative medicine and stem cell therapy. So how do we regenerate the tissues? Using the stem cells, pluripotent stem cells, embryonic stem cells. Using the embryonic stem cells, you can regenerate any of the lost tissue in your body, any of the lost organ in your body, right? So that is stem cell therapy. And how the stem cells are regulated in India, and national guidelines for the stem cell research. These are the contents in the regenerative medicine. And then we go for gene therapy. So what do you mean by therapy? What do you mean by therapy? Therapy is nothing but any kind of a problem that exists in the body. If you are trying to solve the problem, we call it therapy, right? It is nothing but the treatment that you actually give to any kind of an ailment that is present in your body. We call it therapy, right? So we have gene therapy. That means there are certain changes that are happening in our body which are genetical manipulations. Because of the genetical mutations, because of the chromosomal aberrations, because of the genetical aberrations. So there are some diseases that are occurring to the humans. They are the rarest of the rare conditions where most of the companies, pharmaceutical companies, are not willing to produce a drug for that because the market is not viable. So we often call them as orphan drugs, right? So because of this, many people are suffering because of the genetical disorders. That genetical disorders can be negated by the gene therapy. So in this, first we try to understand DNA mutations. What are genetic mutations? And so what gene therapy techniques that we employ? And then what is gene editing? So we discuss about the CRISPR-Cas9 technology here. So through which we edit the genes and we replace the defective gene with the functional gene. And the national guidelines for the gene therapy. And then in the chapter 8, we discuss about DNA fingerprinting. So what do you mean by fingerprint? So you might have already known that DNA, the fingerprints are extremely unique. So that's why we use the fingerprints to identify the person, right? So during the crime scene, so if there is a theft, the very first thing they do is to isolate the fingerprints, right? So here, the same way how your fingerprints are extremely unique, the DNA is also extremely unique. Even the 99.9% of the DNA is same in every organism. So that 0.1% which is different is extremely unique to the individual. So we try to identify the unique sequences and finally identify the individual. That is DNA fingerprinting. So we understand what is DNA fingerprinting and DNA Regulation Bill of 2019. And then in the chapter 9, immunology. So our body is prone to many diseases, right? So there are many organisms which are pathogenic in nature present in the earth. So those will be infecting us constantly, and our body will be trying to defend from the infection in causing a disease, right? It will try to defend our body. So that is immunology. So our immunity, how is it functioning? The study of our immunity is known as immunology. Introduction to the immunity and antibodies. So the antibodies are the actual agents which actually fight against the antigens. Antigens are the foreign pathogens that are entering into our body which are harmful, and antibodies are the bodies that are generated against the antigen. Those are antibodies. And we have this convalescent plasma therapy during the COVID. This has become extremely famous, that so that whatever the antibodies that are produced in the organism which are already affected by the disease, so those antibodies are being isolated and being injected into the other patient, so that the body creates some kind of immunity against the organism. So that is convalescent plasma therapy. Herd immunity. The herd immunity is nothing but when more of the people are vaccinated, so gradually the prevalence of the disease will also be reduced. That is what the herd immunity is. And hypersensitivity reactions. So in the immunity, so body is reacting and defending the body. Sometimes because it reacts so much, it kills our own cells. So that is hypersensitivity reactions. And different human diseases and causative organisms. See, these are the parts which are covered in immunology. And chapter 10 is about vaccination. So once you understand about immunology, we have to understand about vaccination, right? Because so to prevent the disease, right? To prevent the disease, we are taking vaccines. The vaccines are nothing but the biological components which evoke the immune response but will not cause the disease. So those are called the vaccines, right? The vaccines are nothing but sometimes the actual causative organisms which are attenuated in nature, which are weakened, which are being sent into the body to evoke the immune response, so that our body will be immunized and ready to fight the actual infection. So that is what the vaccines are. So we have the introduction to the vaccines, types of vaccines, and universal immunization program. This is the largest immunization program in the world, where we are trying to immunize everyone, all the women and children and everyone, right, against diseases, right? So to prevent the death of the babies because of the preventable diseases, right? So that is universal immunization program. And COVID-19 and vaccines and anti-vaxxers. Anti-vaxxers is nothing but some people are against the vaccines, right? So that is a very stupid thing to actually believe in, that the vaccines are extremely bad. So those are called anti-vaxxers. Those people are called anti-vaxxers. And developments in the fields of vaccines, the recent developments. So those will be covered in the vaccination. And plant biotechnology. So when you're talking about plant biotechnology, so we have known the humans used to be the hunters and gatherers, and later they learned to grow food rather than to gather food, right? Since that time, the agriculture has become the intrinsic factor, but because of the industrial revolution, when the population has blown out of proportion and increased in size, right, increased in number, so because of that, so we have to go for the plant biotechnology, where we produce high yield varieties, disease resistant varieties, pest resistant varieties, right? So that is what the plant biotechnology is. So we discussed about the introduction of plant biotechnology, and so what is the way of producing these different types of plant varieties? The plant tissue culture, right? So the technology which we employ is plant tissue culture, and the production of transgenic plants. So what kind of transgenic plants are being produced? And BT crops, regulation of GMOs in India. So genetically modified organisms are being regulated because we do not know the side effects that are associated with the genetically modified organisms. You are creating the pest resistant variety. That means you are synthesizing the pesticide within the plant variety, so that when the pest eats the plant, immediately it dies. So when the pesticide is being produced within the plant itself, when the other organisms are consuming, what detrimental effects are being associated with that plant are not known. So that's why the GMOs are being regulated in India. So Genetical Engineering Appraisal Committee is the body which actually authorizes the production of BT varieties. So far only the BT cotton is being widely produced in the larger scale in India. Other than that, no other plant variety is being produced. And Cartesian protocol on biosafety. So these are the contents of plant biotechnology. And next one is food fortification. So when you are going to the shopping mall, so when you are buying groceries, you might have seen this F plus symbol, fortified food. So you might have seen the oil packets with vitamin A and vitamin D. So that is what we call food fortification. Because in India, most of the people are deficit in the micronutrients. So the government is adding those micronutrients into the food varieties, and then they are supplying to minimize the many diseases, to reduce the malnutrition in the humans. So that is what we call food fortification. And finally, in the part 1, the bioinformatics. The bioinformatics is nothing but converting all the biological information into the in silico, into the computers, so that we'll be able to manipulate however you want. So that is what we call bioinformatics. So if I really want to identify the genetical sequence in the other organisms, if the similar sequence is present or not. So the practically I cannot verify. So I have to convert this information into the in silico, and then I'll have to verify that. That is bioinformatics. The same way, the drug manufacturing. If I really want to manufacture a drug, whether it is compatible enough or not, so in silico I work on it. So that is bioinformatics. So introduction Indian bioinformatics, bioinformatics as interdisciplinary field and initiatives in the field of bioinformatics. This concludes the part 1. Okay, this concludes the part 1 in advancements of science and technology. As you have seen, here we clearly discussed about the advancements rather than the core sciences. So only whenever it is required, we discuss about the foundational concepts to enhance your understanding about the advancements. So that is what is being discussed. Core sciences like all the invertebrate phyla, vertebrate phyla, all the plant varieties, all these core sciences were not discussed in our chapters, right? So the next one is space technology, right? So immediately after the humans existed on the earth, right? After the life has been formed, after the life has evolved, after the humans came into the existence, they started to understand about the space, right? So they used to look into the sky, and they used to wonder, so what actually made these stars? What actually made this earth? How magnificent the sky is? They started to wonder about the space. So the next chapter we're gonna study is about the space technology, right? So in the space technology, the chapter 14, we are discussing about the introduction of space technology. Few terminologies you have to be familiar before we get into the concepts. And India and the space research. So since when it actually started, right? So INCOSPAR was actually started later, ISRO in 1969, and later the advancements, all this we're gonna discuss. And ISRO as our organizational structure. So because when you are talking about the space research, the world started to look into the space technology, not to really prosper the space technology, but to make the space the military base. Alright, so the later with the peace treaty, so we stopped utilizing the outer space for weaponizing or for military purposes. So after that, the space research has been redefined and has become the area where it solved the people's problems, right? And ISRO, the organizational structure, centers as well as units and autonomous bodies under ISRO, and the milestone of the space programs in India, and the first in space, right? So all the first in space, the list I have given in the chapter 14 and chapter 15. So to understand the space technology, first we have to understand the orbits, because ultimately it is about the satellites in the space and how you are observing the Earth as well as the universe. So to understand that, you have to put all these satellites into the orbits. So you understand the orbits, introduction to the orbits, types of orbits, and geostationary satellite constellation. And finally, the launch stations. To really launch the satellites, you have to have the launch stations. So what is a launch station? What parameters do you have to consider to establish a launch station? And what important launch stations are present in India? Or are we looking for any new launch station? That is all discussed in the chapter 16. And chapter 17 is about launch vehicles, right? So when you're talking about launch vehicles, the very first thing we started working on is SLV. and then ASLV, and then the PSLV, the working horse of ISRO, and then the GSLV, right? And along with the GSLV, we are talking about RLV-TD, reusable launch vehicle, as well as the small satellite launch vehicle. So all these launch vehicles are discussed in detail in the chapter 16. And in the chapter 17, launch vehicles, and chapter 18, the satellites and space explorations. So how many different types of satellites do we have, right? That is being discussed. So the satellite is in the sense, any object that is revolving around a planet is called a satellite, and we have different types of satellites, right? Earth observation satellite, navigation satellites, and as well as communication satellites. So all these satellites, how many different types of satellites have been sent into the space to complement India, to benefit India? So all this is being discussed in satellites and space explorations. So when you're talking about the satellites, right, they are observing the Earth, and the space explorations, they are exploring the space, right? They are exploring the space. So we have Earth observation satellites, IRS satellites, applications, communication satellites, and the applications, navigation satellites and the applications, and Indian space explorations, Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, so as well as the visions. So all these space explorations, right? So we are discussing in this chapter, and Indian space initiatives. The part 3 consists of missile technology. So once we understood the space, right, now the problem comes with the protection of the space. So we have to protect the space. To protect the space, we have to have the missile technology, right? If you see the history also, so once the humans started to evolve, so they have understood the importance of land for the agrarian purposes, and they have to protect their territory, right? So that is the reason the kingdoms have actually formed, and the kingdoms later transformed into the governments, right? Because of the democracy, right? So now protecting the space has been extremely important objective of every country. Protecting the sovereignty of the land is the prime objective. Protecting the national interest is the prime objective of every country. So the part 3 consists of missile technology. In the chapter 19, we are discussing the missile technology, right? The history of the missile development. So when you're talking about the history of the missile development, the Mysorean rockets in India, where the history, it was the legacy, where the Britishers have taken the technology and developed the missiles. Alright, so history of the missile development, chronological development of the missiles, and technology in India. So what kind of technology we are employing for the development of the missiles, and what different parts of missiles do we have. And finally, the classification of missiles. The classification is of different types. So based upon the launch systems, it can be the surface to surface missile, surface to air missile, air to surface missile, or the submarine launch missile. So there are different classifications based upon the technology. You have ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles. And based upon the speed, you have the subsonic, supersonic and hypersonic missiles. And based upon the warhead which we have the conventional warhead, we have the biological as well as nuclear, right? The conventional and strategic weapons we have. The conventional which use the conventional forms of warhead, whereas the strategic, it can be biological, it can be nuclear or chemical, right? So internationally, the use of biological and chemical weapons has been banned, and India is also the signatory of the biological and chemical weapons convention, but it is not a part of nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And so missile development in India, what kind of missiles have we developed? So that we're going to discuss in chapter 20. So chapter 20, we are dealing with ballistic missiles. The ballistic missiles are nothing but atmospheric re-entry vehicles. Ballistic missiles are atmospheric re-entry vehicles, right? So in this, initially we started purchasing the missiles from the other countries, and we found that it is not at all feasible, right? So we have to ensure the self-sufficiency in the arms and ammunition, or else what is the point, right? If every time you want to fight an enemy, right, you have to go and you have to get weapon from the other country. So it is not practically possible, and India was not supported by many countries because India has not signed the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And within the first few years only, India has fought many wars, right? So 47 it started with a war, and after that, so we had this 64, we had a 62, we had a war, 64 we had a war, and 71 we had a war, and 98 we had a war. So we had consistent wars, So we have to ensure the self-sufficiency in the arms and ammunition. So that's why we have started this integrated guided missile development program headed by APJ Abdul Kalam. So we started to develop the 5 missiles, the Prithvi, Agni, Trishul, Akash, Nag. Right? So later we started developing the K series missile. These are the submarine launched missiles. Right? So these missiles, K series missiles, are both conventional as well as nuclear, Shaurya, Surya, Prahar, and air to surface missiles. So these are the different types of missiles that we have been developing, and there are Prithvi 1, Prithvi 2, Prithvi 3, Agni 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are different variants of those weapons. That is clearly discussed within our chapters. And Indian Ballistic Missile Defense Program. So when you are talking about ballistic missiles, so we are developing missiles, it is fine, but are we developing technologies to defend from the ballistic missiles that are being developed by other country? Right? So one of the mistakes Tipu Sultan has actually made, because Tipu Sultan was a phenomenal warrior, he's a phenomenal king who actually understood the importance of economical power to become a military might. Right? So in the Anglo-Mysore War 1, the Britishers were shocked to see the way the army was actually functioning. Right? So with the weapons he had. So he was the person who actually sent embassies as well to the other countries to gain support to throw the Britishers out of India. In the Anglo-Mysore War 2 as well, the fight continued the same way, but 3-4 lost. Because Tipu Sultan was precisely focused more on attacking rather than defending the territory. And finally in the Anglo-Mysore War 4, he was not able to defend the territory, to defend his capital Srirangapatnam, and finally he was asked to sign the subsidiary alliance, where when he rejected, so he was killed. Right? So because of that, we have understood the importance of defending the territory at the same time attacking. So to defend our territory from the ballistic missile, we have Indian Ballistic Missile Defense Program. We have Prithvi Air Defense System and Advanced Air Defense Systems with the radars. Right? So that has been clearly discussed over here. And the working of the ballistic missile defense system and imported ballistic missile defense systems from the other countries. S-400 from the Russia, we have imported the ballistic missile defense system. Okay? And that is clearly discussed in the chapter 20. And in the chapter 21, we are discussing the cruise missiles. The cruise missiles are also known as terrain-hugging missiles. Right? The ballistic missiles, they are atmospheric re-entry. Right? You are shooting it into the air and then they are the freely falling body. So because of which the enemies will get to know that the missile has been fired. Right? So to make the attack in the stealth, right, you have the cruise missiles where they move parallel to the earth. So there are terrain-hugging missiles. Right? So the cruise missiles developed by India. So we have the BrahMos, one of the most deadliest missiles. It is a hypersonic cruise missile. Right? And we have anti-cruise missile defense systems which we have developed along with Israel, Barak 8. So that is discussed in the cruise missiles. And finally, we have unmanned aerial vehicles. We have unmanned aerial vehicles. So in the present technology, so when you are fighting, so we have to minimize the human loss. Right? So that's why we started using the drones, unmanned aerial vehicles for spying, reconnaissance and for attack as well. Right? So how many different types of unmanned aerial vehicles are developed by DRDO, and what are the other drones that we have been using for the military purposes and tactical purposes, and drone regulations in India, because so we have few geographical areas where you cannot actually fly a drone. So there are certain qualifications that are actually required for the individual to actually fly a drone. And the anti-drone technologies, the prelims questions can be asked in the anti-drone technologies. It was previously asked for in UPSC Civil Services examination. And in chapter 23, we have other defense technologies. So when you're talking about other defense technology, we have submarines, we have nuclear submarines which are extremely important for second strike capability during the nuclear attack, and battle tanks, frigates, destroyers, aircrafts, bombs, fighter aircrafts, commercial aircraft, miscellaneous information, the weapon convention and treaties. This is extremely important if you are going for writing an essay or as well as the mains answers. The weapons convention and treaties, treaties of conventional weapons, space arms control treaty, defense acquisition procedure, innovations in defense excellence, and essential defense service bills and defense exercises. These are all the part of defense technologies. And chapter 24. So this is your UPSC mains question as well as an essay topic. So is India a responsible nuclear power? So India is not a signatory of Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. India said we will not sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it went to test the nuclear weapon in 1974 after the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971. And after that, many sanctions were imposed, and finally we have understood that no, we have to go for tests, right? And it has gone for 5 other tests in 1998, right? So Pokhran 2. So because of which India has become the nuclear power, and it has devised its nuclear doctrine saying that India is a responsible nuclear power. But is it really a responsible nuclear power, right? So what is the current status of India and no first use policy, right? And what is the nuclear triad and nuclear command authority? So all these concepts are clearly discussed in chapter 24, that India is a responsible nuclear power, right? So the Japan is one country which was actually attacked by the nuclear weapons, and Japan itself is trusting India with the nuclear weapons, even though it is not a signatory of Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? So India is a responsible nuclear power. And chapter 25, Indian defense procurements, right? So what kind of weapons, what kind of missiles, what kind of aircrafts were purchased by India from the other countries? So that constitutes chapter 25, from United States of America, Russia, India, Israel, so Turkey, Armenia, France. So with all these countries, what kind of pacts do we have? What kind of technologies have we purchased, right? And what about the Indian defense spending? So how much money is being spent, right? So this is extremely crucial for mains examination. So that concludes the energy sector. So that concludes the missile technology, and then we go for the energy sector. So the India is one country which is energy deficient. It has to survive on the west or the east for the energy requirements. So we do not have the greater oil deposits, unfortunately. So we have to depend upon the west as well as the east. And when you're talking about the west, it is mostly unstable. So that's why India is looking towards the forest regions of Russia to actually supplement its oil requirement, right? So when you're talking about energy sector, so we know, so the India has been producing energy using coal, right, which is a non-renewable energy resource. So because of which the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere is increasing, resulting in global warming. So we have understood that it is the most unsustainable way of living, because in the future, the next generations will not be able to survive in those climatic conditions, right? So that's why we have to go for the renewable energy sector that is being discussed in the energy sector. So introduction to the energy resources, draft national energy policy, and renewable energy of India, and all the different types of renewable energies have been clearly discussed with the government policies as well as initiatives, right? Solar energy introduction, the working of photovoltaic cell, what is the functioning of the solar cells, and promotion of solar energy in India, what different initiatives government has actually taken, advantages and disadvantages of solar energy. The same applies to the hydro energy. So when you're talking about the hydro energy, mega hydro power projects are unsustainable, right? So when you're talking about hydro, so types of hydro projects, small hydro projects in India which are extremely renewable, and hydro power schemes, and environmental impacts of small hydro power projects. And then the wind energy, so India has greater potential of wind energy as well. So onshore and offshore wind energy, advantages and disadvantages. So government policies for the wind energy and miscellaneous information about the wind energy. And then the geothermal energy. So when you're talking about geothermal energy, so we are not harnessing the geothermal energy as much as the potential we have. So it is just in the entry stages. So what kind of geothermal energy, what are the geothermal potential areas that we have already mapped them. So we are trying to build the geothermal energy as well. And finally the biomass, which has a greater potential in India. So with the biomass energy, So it is a conventional form of energy. At the same time, we are producing the biofuels with the use of biomass. So the National Biofuel Policy, advantages of biofuels and other initiatives for biofuel generations. And in the energy mix, we are trying to complement the biofuels, bioethanol and biodiesel in the petrol as well as diesel in India. So for whatever the petrol you are using, that is actually coming with the biofuels, right? The next one, ocean and tidal energy. So this is one of the costliest energies. So that's why it is still under the research. It is not commercially viable. So the ocean and tidal energy. So that is the advantages and disadvantages of ocean and tidal energy that we will be discussing in the chapter 32. And then the non-renewable energy resources. When you're talking about the non-renewable energy resources, we have the coal, lignites, coal reserves, right? And unconventional hydrocarbons, right? In chapter 33 as well as 34, right? In this, the most important questions that are actually coming from the coal bed, methane, shale gas, and the gas hydrates. So these are the areas where more amount of the prelims level questions are being asked by UPSC. So that is the area where you have to specifically focus upon. And finally, the nuclear energy. This is the only non-renewable energy which is extremely clean. It does not produce any of the carbon, but it is non-renewable, right? So that's why we are trying to tap the nuclear energy potential in India. And so far, we are producing 6,750 megawatts of electricity. And we have been slowed down when it comes to the nuclear energy production in India. So that has to be paced up, right? So we have the nuclear fusion reaction. Nuclear fusion reaction is extremely safe compared to that of the nuclear fission, because nuclear fission actually produces the radioactive material as the byproduct, which we have to reduce the radioactivity and then dispose, right? Whereas the nuclear fusion reaction produces only water. So that is the safest energy, but controlling the nuclear fusion reaction is extremely difficult, right? So, and we have the Indian nuclear reserves. So when you're talking about Indian nuclear reserves, we have the uranium as well as the thorium reserves. We produce about 25% of the thorium, as well as we have the largest mine of uranium in India, Tumalpalli, Andhra Pradesh. And the storage and disposal of the radioactive waste, Indian nuclear power capacity, slowdown of the nuclear power sector in India. I have already told you we have been slowed down. Important civil nuclear agreements and other nuclear agreements, advantages of the nuclear energy, disadvantages, and Indian nuclear energy as well as the world. So these are all the concepts we have covered in the nuclear energy, which is extremely important for the prelims as well as the mains perspective as well as for essay. And part 5, we are talking about ICT, Information and Communication Technology. So when you're talking about information and communication technology, so we have ICT industry, right? So India has the largest constellation of communication satellites in the world, one of the largest constellation of communication satellites with one of the largest transponders, right? So what is this ICT? What regulatory bodies do we have? What are the government programs on development of the ICT? So what initiatives government has actually taken to ensure the citizen to citizen, citizen to government, government to government services, right? Business to business services. So all these initiatives and the importance of e-governance, this is extremely important for mains as well as essay. And when you're talking about ICT, so with all the different applications, so we have ICT, science and engineering, introduction, mobile phones and radio spectrum. Talking of mobiles, one of the questions UPSC has asked previously is, what is the difference between LTE and VoLTE? So that is the prelims question that was asked. We consistently see that VoLTE tag over there. But what is this VoLTE? That is being asked for in UPSC, right? And what is this World Wide Web? What is networking? What is Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Li-Fi and WiMAX? So all this we have to be familiar for the prelims perspective. And evolution of the supercomputers. Once we understand about the computers, so now we are dealing with the supercomputers now, right? Supercomputers are nothing but the larger array of processors which are linked in series, right? Increasing the computational capability of a computer. So that is a supercomputer. So we have the supercomputing mission where we ensure the Indian knowledge network is all integrated with the supercomputers, where the knowledge can be transferred and utilized and manipulated the way we want, manipulated in the sense, not in a negative sense, but to construct the data, to analyze the data in the larger scale. Because when you're talking about supercomputers, we measure the speed of the supercomputers in flops, floating point operations per second. There are the billion operations per second. So if it is that fast, so if you really want to launch a satellite into an orbit in a particular location, so we have to make use of a supercomputer to exactly place it in that particular location. And so for the weather forecasting, so for the climate modeling, for all those purposes, we have to use supercomputers. So that's why we have to study about the supercomputers. So what different supercomputers are being utilized in India? So how fast they are. So that is being discussed in chapter 38. And next chapter, part 6. It is about artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. So with the advancements of technology, we are dealing with artificial intelligence now. So even your mobile camera is coming with artificial intelligence, right? If you immediately after you click the picture, depending upon the object which you are capturing, it will modify. The settings are all intertwined within the camera, where it automatically replicates those settings, right? So that is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence by definition is nothing but the mimicking the actual intelligence of the human being and complementing the human behavior, right? So that is artificial intelligence. Introduction and contrast between machine learning as well as deep learning. So when you are talking about artificial intelligence, the very first thing comes is the data. Without the data, there is no intelligence. You see the same way how the humans function, right? Our intelligence is nothing but the data we incorporate in our minds, right? So the data, and then comes the machine learning, and then comes the deep learning, and then the artificial intelligence, right? The deep learning is more deeper, where the artificial neural networks comes into the picture, where the based, even though you're not training the machine, so based upon the responses it is receiving throughout the year, try to understand the data and finally segregate the data and give a proper response. That is deep learning. And artificial intelligence and India, advantages of artificial intelligence in important centers, right? So all this is covered in artificial intelligence. And finally, Internet of Things. So as I told, for artificial intelligence, data is required. How are we getting the data? Internet of Things. So India is going to become the largest of the areas where we are using Internet of Things. The smartwatches which we are using, the chips we are using, the specs, the lenses which we are using, they are all associated with artificial Internet of Things. The smart homes is a part of Internet of Things, right? Smart grid is a form of Internet of Things. So we understand about the Internet of Things, the levels of IoT types, applications, concerns, as well as draft policy on Internet of Things of 2015. All this is being covered in part 6. Part 7. Cyber security, robotics and nanotechnology. All these three areas are covered in part 7. Cyber security. So when you're talking about cyber security, so we are in the cyber space. We are all connected together, right? So with your mobile, you're connected. With your laptop, you're connected. With all your devices, IoT devices, you're connected. Your smartwatch, you're connected. So with all this connectivity that we have, the cyberspace has to be extremely protected, right? So using my mobile, if you can hack into my mobile, you can get to know at what time I leave my home, at what time I reach back, right? How much time I actually spend on the mobile, what kind of data I am consuming, right? So based upon that, whether I can be manipulated or not. So everything can be understood by the internet which I am using, which I am consuming. So that's why cyberspace has to be extremely secure. So that is being discussed in the 41. What kind of cyber threats are we having? So what are the recent threats that India has been faced? What are the threats that are frequent? Right? So all this is being discussed in the chapter 41 along with the draft encryption policy. And then the robotics. So the robots are nothing but the machines which try to mimic the human activity and finally reduce the workload of the human. That is what the robotic does. It is an automatic process that is being done. So the washing machine is a robot. It is doing what a human is capable of doing without the human's interference. So it is streamlining of the procedure, right? That is what the robotics is. Facts and figures and robotics in India, how the robotics is being developed in India and what are the government policies and as well as initiatives for the development of robotics in India. That is discussed in chapter 42 and chapter 43 is nanotechnology. So when you're talking about nanotechnology, so the macromolecules have different physical as well as chemical properties, whereas when you scale to the nano level, so the properties are totally different. So you can see the gold, right? So whereas the gold nanoparticles are anti-cancer nature, right? So that is the beautiful property of the nanotechnology. And also we have the dresses that are being designed which actually repel the dust. You do not have to wash, anti-stinking nature. So all this is the development of nanotechnology. So what is nanotechnology? Evolution of nanotechnology, initiatives for the promotion, major research, applications of nanomaterial challenges, and the current issues. So all these are associated with the nanotechnology that we have discussed very clearly in chapter 43. And miscellaneous. So there are many areas that are not a part of any of those predefined areas which are coming into the miscellaneous. And one of the important area where you have to specifically focus is contributions in the field of mathematics and astronomy in ancient India, contributions to the field of science in ancient India, medical science in ancient India, important developments in ancient achievements of Indian science and technology in the modern India. All these areas are extremely important for you because it is clearly given in the UPSC syllabus, right? Whatever the contributions that are given by Indians towards the science and technology is extremely important for us to study. That I have clearly defined by segregating into ancient, medieval and modern, right? All the people I have covered. So you have to study this area very clearly. And the other important news, the other miscellaneous, whatever the current issues that we have covered in the recent times, that is all a part of the important news. Okay, so this is the contents of UPSC Advancements of Science and Technology book by Ashok. So all the very best. If you have any questions, please put down in the comments below. Thank you.